Hi everyone, welcome. I'm down here at my wormery preparing to check in on a pair of bins that were just recently paired up, buddied up. They've got 47 days, maybe 43 days difference in their ages. The older one is 100 days of age today. It's the one over there that doesn't have any sort of a stacked up situation going on. It's the one on the bottom. The one next to it that does have a container on top. It's not a typical worm bin we've got going on here. It's sort of a breeding experiment. And 57 days, 43, I think that's the breakdown. I've got a little bit of info about these systems on my green board that I could share with you. So why don't we get these bins up on the bench, and yeah, there's the green board. And I'll share that info with you, and then we can get to feeding them. Let's get to work. We even admitted during the last feeding, which consisted of nothing more than coffee and grit. I think we might have thrown a little worm chow in there, but we did admit to ourselves during the last check-in that we were in there just to gawk. So they got a little basic feeding. They'll get more of the coffee, but today they're also going to get some banana peels. It's nice when I could just grab their food and bring it down without needing a container to bring it down in. But really quick, just to show you what I want to take care of today, the breeder bin is up here on top. It's the same age as the younger system over here. They're both 57 days of age today, and I'd really like to take the 126 wormies that have been, working it in this breeder system, test system, and just release them into a regular bin and bring it into the breeding experiment, which I don't really think resulted in a great many cocoons, or, we're not going to probably see any sort of a worm explosion because of what happened in here. The one thing I really found interesting is that the worms that live in here inside this breeder system, that I have to continue to call it that, I believe, because that's really what I intended it to be. It really just almost turned into more of an experiment to see what happens when you're allowing the systems, or the system, to have an extremely high moisture level. So every time I would come in here every so often to feed, and you'll see, even though the regular 57-day-old system has been fed only 5 times, we've been in here 12 times, because I would come in here every so often just to add a little bit more worm chow, add a little bit more moisture. But I think it's time to just get them back into service with any other regular worm bin out there. And I guess, observations, they're just so much chubbier from having all this surplus moisture on their hands. Perhaps I'm just not taking the time to see if I could find them, but I don't generally see a lot of cocoons, which was what we were hoping for. Last check-in, we did see 2 worms latched together mating. Here and there, like this guy or girl or whatever, this one too, they're that little bulge on their body looks a little bit more prominent than on other worms. Other worms clearly demonstrate that they've got that bulge on their bodies too, but these that have it a little bit more swollen, I sometimes think that those are the ones that might actually be in the process of getting ready to drop off a cocoon. But we're not going to return these actually to the 57-day-old worm bin. That's the place where they came from originally. I figured we'd transplant them into the 100-day-old system, which is thought to have somewhat fewer worms. So these 126 worms is what we estimated to populate this system right here. They're just going to go in to help boost the numbers over in the 100-day-old system. So that's a transplant basically. But rather than me taking 126 worms directly putting them into here, they got to hang out in here for a little while. So this guy doesn't appreciate me messing with them. I think once we get the regular systems opened up, it's probably best that I just drop that stuff right into the place where it's intended to go, and then we can really consider our little breeding experiment to be a done deal. Alright, I'm just going to fold this over here. Try to prevent the worms that are on that plastic from freaking out too much. And still got this plastic over here from the breeder bin, which we won't be needing anymore at the end. Alright, so once again, it does sort of feel like the star of the show is most likely going to be the papaya, but there's so many other things going on in here, and the board showed some of it, but let me just really highlight some of it. There's a gourds that were placed into these a month ago. The older system, the 100-day-old system's got a cork floating around in it, which we haven't seen in a long time. It would be kind of nice to see it. There's also a peach pit, which has most likely by this time been stripped clean of any fruit on it. And if we encounter that, I think we could probably remove that at this point, since it's been in here for so long. And yeah, we definitely positioned the papaya smack in the middle of each system, and there it is, some of the pink, a little bit of the pink showing of it. And what's under it? Some from paper, I guess. Yeah, some bedding that was placed below it, a little bit of tissue or napkin, I believe. Large chunks of paper. Alrighty. And the not so complete gourd. You have some yellow napkin in here too, not surprising. Alright. There's banana peel in here, and they're going to be getting more banana peel. The gourds I'm generally not going to be spending a lot of time on, especially since they're still so early on in their breakdown process. There's not going to be any movement on those for a long time. But right here, smack in the middle, is where I would expect to see the most activity due to the papaya. And there's a little chunk of it showing right there I saw a moment ago, and another piece of it that rolled off in that direction. But I think for the most part, I didn't know if I was going to see leftovers of it, and the fact that we're not really seeing too much is not too much of a surprise. Perhaps there's a little fragment of it here and there in a couple spots, but I think the papaya is history now after 21 days. There's a great many worms hanging out over there on my hand. Oh, there's this huge piece of napkin here too. At least we've taken these 2 or 3 napkins, and we've at this point created probably a dozen or more smaller fragments of them, rather than just letting them remain as big chunks. And a little bit more action down here in the feeding zone, but I think we've more or less excavated the 57-day-old system nicely here. And all the stuff we're going to reload, let's just see if we can get it together so we don't forget too much of it. We did use a lot of my shredded paper cardboard leaf mixture, my prepared bedding, and it's nice to be blending that in. I thought there'd be more of it, and I thought there'd be more blending of it in, but it doesn't seem like all that much of it remains, or at least it's well camouflaged amongst a whole bunch of castings material. Alright, more napkin. I got a comment the other day. It's like, hey, you're pretty good at ripping those napkins with a single hand. You've really got that process down. And I don't know why, but I just get a kick out of those sort of observations, and I guess it's not just a comment, it's a compliment. It's like, hey, you're pretty handy there, dude. Which is kind of cool. So many times it's tempting to just reach in there with the can that I'm striving to keep clean. So I want to have a hand that is not soiled so I can use it to manage the camera, electronics, other things like that. And a lot of times the hand that's meant to remain clean does not remain clean. Alright. One of the gourd halves. Look at all that. A whole bunch of bedding was jammed inside of it. And I'm not sure. I don't think it's one of those things that was added after the systems were buddied up to each other, so there wouldn't have been any attempt to make sure that both systems have one of these. This is a mango seed, so it does look like some of that furry substance is starting to like lift off and even tear off there from the outer surface. I would think it's still probably too rigid to expect it to crack open, so that luscious seed inside of it is just awaiting worms to come inside and nibble it away. So at some point they'll get a nice treat to that, but I wasn't able to help them with access to it. Here I don't really think I saw, this was just a little almost like a bone with marrow inside of it, but in this case it's not a bone or marrow, it's just vermicompost jammed within a piece of gourd fragment. Alright, let's get through with this feeding and let these little guys get back to work. This is where my there's good chunks of cardboard in here too. This is where my prepared bedding comes in real handy, but it feels to me like we might have made a larger opening in the younger system. Let's make sure we leave sufficient space for a nice generous helping of my prepared bedding to go in as a nice foundation for today's feeding. My worm chow, I did not take the worm chow down off the shelf. Usually I like to throw a little of that in here with the coffee when I'm feeding the coffee, but on this occasion I just sort of failed to include it, and that's just fine. And here we go. Nice little delicious chunk of fruit. Going back in, I do wonder what's up with the cork. At some point it'd be nice to sort of come in here with an objective of zeroing in on that thing and perhaps striving to keep it with the feeding so that we could check in on it here and there, although there's not a lot to be seen on the cork. More recently it's definitely reduced in size, so it is nice to see that it's making good progress. And you know, I think we will till around the outer edges to just to aerate things a little bit. But before we do that, let's not forget we wanted to release these little guys into a regular old worm bin, and rather than returning them to the very heavily populated system over there that they came from, we're just going to drop them into the other system to help boost the numbers by 126 worms. And who knows, maybe some cocoons and some future baby worms coming at some point in the near future. But man, I think I do want to repeat this test with the high moisture, even if not so much for the sake of breeding, but just to see the worms get as fat as they do, which is awesome. You know, I got to thinking about tilling around in the outer edges like we usually do, just to aerate and stuff like that, and maybe we would stumble on the cork, but you know, once in a while I do like to deliberately just not do that and just leave some of the material other than the area where we're adding the food, leave it be so that it can just kind of sit there. You know, before we drop in this feeding zone indicator, let's give them some leaf cover. Seems like all they got on the top surface is their feeding zone indicator. A little bit of leaf cover seems like a nice little perk, right? They've earned it. 100 days in service, right? Happy 100 days. Get a special top covering. And not so special. Other systems have paper. Some systems have fancy bubble wrap like these guys here. Other ones just have a plastic bag, which is just as good. I don't know. Perhaps there's a little benefit to the airflow beneath the bubble wrap, but plastic bag is good as well. So that's it for the check-in, everyone. Hopefully you enjoyed it. If you did, as always, please don't forget to leave me a quick thumbs up before you go. That's always really appreciated. And if you haven't done so already, please also consider subscribing to the channel. That's very much appreciated as well. All right, everyone. Have a great day. Thanks for watching. Bye now.